Today, we're tackling a topic that's at the core of meaningful relationships, good decision-making, and great leadership: avoiding assumptions. Assumptions are a natural part of being human. They come from our brain's need to assess situations quickly for survival. But while they protected us in the past, in modern life, they can derail us. They can lead us to poor decisions, misunderstandings, and missed opportunities. Letting go of assumptions is about unlocking your potential, not just about avoiding mistakes. When you challenge assumptions, you gain clarity, strengthen relationships, and make smarter decisions. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. In this episode, we'll explore how your assumptions are tied to survival instincts, the surprising lessons some people learned during the recent US elections by moving out of assumptions and into a different mode of thinking, and a powerful 3-step method to avoid incorrect assumptions and gain clarity and truth, and strengthen your relationships both personally and professionally. So let's dive in. I'm Lucy Gable, Integrative Leadership Optimal Performance Coach, author, speaker, and professor at the George Washington University School of Medicine. And you're listening to Leadership, Life, Health, and Happiness. Before we get started, I want to add a couple of current events that are happening right now. At this very moment, I'm staying in a rental that's very close to where the SpaceX Starship is getting built. And it's going to be taking off for the 6th time tomorrow. So if you hear weird sounds in my background, I'm sorry about that. There's nothing I can do, but you can just chalk it up to having an experience with me. The other thing I wanted to say is we're very close to the US holiday Thanksgiving, and we're also very close to Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's and many other holidays. So this specific subject is going to be really useful for you in situations when you're gathering with all different kinds of people, with all different kinds of outlooks on life and politics, religion, you name it. So keep that in mind as you listen to the podcast. And as always, if you liked this episode, please let me know by clicking like or giving it 5 stars or writing me a comment, and let me know what this made you think about, because it's a deep one. Speaking of noise in the background, all right, so let's get started. Assumptions are everywhere, in our workplace, our friendships, and families. The most recent US elections are a very public example of what I want to say regarding assumptions today. It was a heated and divisive time. Across the internet, assumptions ran rampant as people on both sides made sweeping judgments about those who voted differently from them. Assumptions were being stated very publicly, and also they were going on silently inside many people's minds. It didn't help that there were absolutely bots out there on the internet fueling the division and hatred. I'm not going to say where I think the bots came from, but I've done a lot of internet marketing in my recent business, and I'm familiar with the techniques that are used to get people to feel certain emotions, respond, or like, or just get a post to go viral. And I saw a lot of that going on. Whether your emotions were fueled by something that someone or something had said, or your own thoughts and fears, statements in your mind could be something like, if you voted this way, you must believe X, Y, and Z, or only people like that, vote for them. And it was going on both sides, of course. There are also assumptions that people made when they didn't know how people voted, but assume that they knew. It's too easy to assume something about someone, whether it be regarding voting or anything else, based on where they work, who their friends are, who their family is, or even how they dress and how they speak. But assumptions often miss the mark. Some people I know were able to pull themselves out of the brutal cycle of assumptions around the elections. They noticed they might not be seeing the whole picture, and they decided to get curious and ask questions. They looked up answers to questions online, and some even got bold enough to ask questions to those who were close to them, who they figured had different viewpoints about the election. And they got some surprises. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not easy to move from going down your brain's natural pathways of thinking and switch channels to get curious and ask questions. But stick with me till the end, and I'll give you some tips on how you can get out of your head from making assumptions and into the many varying sides of reality, which is most of the time a much better place to be. And it's definitely a much better place from which to make decisions when you know as many sides of the story as you possibly can. I'll also share with you what most of these people found out once they did get out of their head and their own assumptions. But first, let's dig into why we make assumptions in the first place. Assumptions are tied to our survival instincts. Our brains are designed to assess situations quickly, make snap judgments, and act immediately to keep us safe. It's part of the fight, flight, freeze response, and it's what's helped our ancestors to survive. This response brings a high level of stress to the body during that time because the brain causes a cascade of stress chemicals to release so we can do what we need to do to survive. If you want more on the physiological reactions of fight, flight, freeze and how you can control them to a large extent, I've got details on that in episode 21, The Effects of Stress and How to Deal with It. I'll put links below in the descriptions. Fight, flight, freeze helped us to survive in the past, but in modern life, this quick judgment system isn't always needed, and it frequently causes us to react in a worst case scenario way that isn't based on reality. Instead of protecting us, it can lead us to misjudge people or misjudge circumstances, overreact, and make bad decisions. The good news is we have another powerful tool, which is our frontal lobe. This is the part of the brain that's responsible for executive functioning, decision-making, logic, and self-control. You can purposefully engage this part of your brain to get out of fight, flight, freeze and make better decisions and react in a more conscious and wise way. What would life be like if you questioned your assumptions and made decisions from a place of clarity instead of fear? Let's explore. The ability to pause and question assumptions is a superpower. It allows us to engage the executive functioning frontal lobe rather than relying solely on the fight, flight, freeze response. This shift makes great decision makers, good leaders, and helps you maintain healthy relationships, especially in emotionally charged situations. And it ultimately keeps you healthier and helps you live a longer, stronger life, because current evidence finds that stress for too long or too often is part of what causes early aging and complex illness. It's one of the factors that'll shorten those telomeres I talked about in the last episode. You can practice this superpower so you can tap into it easier and more often. You can purposefully develop it and fine-tune it to help you become the person you aspire to be. I'll give you 3 steps to doing this. But first, I'll share what several people I know found out about others whom they were making assumptions about during the elections after they got out of fight, flight, freeze and engaged their frontal lobe. After jumping out of fight, flight, freeze, where they were jumping into conclusions, there were a few people I know who started asking questions. They did it in 2 ways. Some started looking up answers online. Now, that kind of investigation requires you begin to think outside the box for it to work, because you can get to asking questions that only lead to answers that you expect. To avoid getting into a silo, you want to make sure you're not just going to the same gurus that you usually listen to. You don't go to the same news groups, and you don't go to your same friends, because you know they're going to give you the same stuff. You need to purposefully seek out new information and new perspectives. And that means purposely go to other reputable sources. Go to the places where others with differing opinions are voicing their opinions. The second way some people did it was they actually summoned the courage to ever so gently ask questions to the people they were making assumptions about. And they had some really good conversations. Basically, everyone who got curious and investigated ended up uncovering some surprises. Why? Because people's reasons for their actions are frequently more complex than they seem. Many found out the people who made different choices from them didn't align with the stereotypes they'd been hearing online and in the news. Some people had economic concerns that they hadn't talked about. Others were motivated by deeply personal experiences or local issues that didn't fit the national narrative. Some people found out that their friend or their family member never fit the stereotype in the first place. And by keeping an open mind, these curious individuals not only learned something new, but also bridged divides. They found common ground and even gained a deeper appreciation for perspectives that they hadn't considered before. What about you? Imagine what insights you can gain if you stayed open instead of assuming. How might that shift your relationships or even shift your decisions? But how do you shift out of survival mode and into clarity? You might want to grab something to take notes for this next section. The good news is you don't have to let assumptions and the simpler side of your brain that reacts in fight, flight, freeze control your decisions. Here's how to break free in 3 steps. 1, recognize when you're making assumptions. When you find yourself making judgments, ask yourself, how much of this is an assumption? Is it possible that I don't have the whole story? Catching yourself in the act is the first step. 2, think of alternative scenarios. That means challenge your own thoughts. Think of at least 3 other possible explanations for the situation. This simple exercise will help you start to see that there's a bigger picture. Even if you don't know if your possible explanations are true, you're expanding your brain to other possibilities and practicing the art of higher level thinking. And the third step is a critical step. That is, seek out the real story. Gather additional information, and even better, talk to the person you're assuming things about. This is going to offer incredibly important insights. I'm not going to pretend this is easy. It can be hard because it involves putting down your ego, putting down any natural anger. It also involves getting out of fight, flight, freeze mode. Doing the first 2 things on this list can help you through it. But let me give you a little more courage here. So much of the time, what you find out could be something you never imagined, and in a good way. It often happens that way for me, and my clients tell me all the time how it happens that way for them. So go in with positive expectations. I already talked about how to do research successfully. In order to also have successful conversations, it's even more critical that you get yourself into the right frame of mind. You can have productive, positive conversations with people on different sides when you start by shifting your mindset to look at the other person not as an enemy, but someone you want to understand. That means you first have to hold that possibility in your mind that they're not the enemy. How do you do it? It starts with cultivating compassion. That means really wanting to see and understand what's happening in this other person's life. If this person has been important to you in life, it's even more important that you get into the compassionate mode. You can start by remembering all the things you like about them or have appreciated about them in the past. Those memories are valid and possibly more true than what you're making up about them right now. It also helps to remember that humans are never black and white. Everyone is a complex matrix of thoughts, experiences, knowledge, values, emotions, and desires. No one is the same as anyone else. Your goal in this conversation and future conversations like this is to find out more. And when you have the conversations, you're going to want to keep catching yourself when you're making assumptions and putting those assumptions aside. Just keep asking questions. You can't go wrong with asking questions. If you want to learn more about healthy disagreements, check out episode 10, Healthy Conflict Culture, which is also linked in the description. If you'd like to work with me to get better at shifting assumptions, thinking outside the box, and bringing yourself and others to a better place, you know where you can find me, lucygable.com. Remember, assumptions are human, but overcoming them will be what makes you exceptional. Practice noticing your assumptions. When they come up, pause and ask, what else could be true? And then, what questions can I ask to get more clarity? You might be surprised at what you discover and how much better your decisions and your life becomes. Imagine the freedom of acting based on reality, not the stories your mind has created. If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up or give the podcast 5 stars. Leave me a comment if this changed your perspective in any way, and let me know what you'd like to hear about next. Thanks for tuning in. This is Lucy Gable. I'll talk to you next time.